This was one of the best parties I'd ever been to. April 1989. It was a party without much alcohol or weed. Didn't meet anybody new that I wanted to date. I don't remember the food. There wasn't much music. But it was a party that lasted 3 days. At 6 p.m. on a Friday night, a bunch of buses left Chicago and other cities around the country. I was in the bus that left Chicago. Headed for Washington, D.C., 400 or so people in all. People from groups all around the country who were working on housing, education, crime, healthcare, and other issues. Ordinary people who were pissed off, which is what may be happening now in the country, I don't know. I'd never done anything like this, but suddenly I was writing about it for the group that hosted this event, and reaching out to the media and sitting on a bus singing protest songs. It was great. At first I wondered what I was doing there. I was lucky enough to have landed a writing job with one of the most legendary community activists this city had ever seen. Her name was Gail Sincata. I remember how she brought people together and how for 2 years I was lucky enough to write about it. Gail was a huge woman with a gigantic blonde afro. She had 6 sons. She was super smart. She got involved in all kinds of community issues and helped pass federal anti-discrimination housing legislation, and then formed a group that was a national coalition of community groups, or in short, troublemakers. One time she was in a neighborhood where there was a rat problem, and the landlord and alderman were, in a fine Chicago tradition, not doing anything about it. Gail led dozens of people to the alderman's office and nailed a rat to his door. It was a front page story the next day in Chicago, and the rats were on the way out, really. Gail was not afraid of aldermen or other animals, rats, beggars, and she wasn't scared of anyone in Washington either. Gail ran the place I worked with another major character and great person, a community organizer named Shel Trapp, who had once been an assistant pastor in a suburban church. He went on another bus ride down south to protest during the civil rights era. The pastor in his church told him, "If you keep doing stuff like this, you'll never get a suburban church." He said, "Good." So he came to Chicago and organized in city communities. So there I was on the bus, ready for action. Well, it turns out that one thing this group did was what they called hits. Surprise demonstrations where a few hundred people take over a building and meet with folks who had ignored or bullied them. Every time it happened, people who did it were having a lot of fun. It wasn't violent. Of course, many of the people who were involved were in their 70s and 80s. They were just not ready for nursing homes, but were still ready to march. I know it's really obnoxious to just barge into someone's office uninvited, but in some cases, I highly recommend it. When we got to DC, I went to the office of the National Association of Home Builders and checked out the elevators and stairwells because we were going to bring 400 people there the following Monday and demand a meeting with their leadership. After I did this work, I called my dad and said, "Hey Dad, you know what I'm doing with my college education? I'm spying on buildings." My dad said, "Jesus Christ, what kind of a schmuck are you?" So this group had been doing this in DC for almost 20 years. Politicians and media knew about it. I sent out a press release, and somehow when I got to the hotel we were staying at, there was a message on my TV screen that an assistant to the head of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the top housing agency in the country, wanted to talk to me. I was terrified. They know what we're up to. I'm going to lose my job. Oh my God, I'll have to go back to writing about boring stuff. This was just not a typical job for me. See what happens when you study Shakespeare in college? You can get in all kinds of trouble. I went to Shel and I told him what happened. He wasn't upset, he was overjoyed. We know exactly what to do here. And they called Jack Kemp's office, and the person there must have been a little paranoid. And he said, "You can't come to Kemp's house tomorrow. He's having a wedding party for 2 of his daughters." I guess they didn't want 400 low-income people on their lawn. Well, just like that, Gail negotiated a meeting with Jack Kemp, the nation's top housing official, for the following Monday. And I was with 400 people who took over the National Association of Home Builders. It was all a blur, but nobody was scared to speak up. And we got big stories in USA Today, Washington Post, and in these times, which called our gathering a Hellraisers convention. And I thought, these people were kind and smart and very determined and fun. And yes, it all reminded me of that famous quote by Margaret Mead, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." But this was a little edgy, you know, people speaking out like this, you could get in trouble, and I think that's true. But it was still one of the most meaningful things I'd ever done in the workforce. It was not a typical job for me, but I'm glad that I did it. That night when we got back to Chicago, I was talking to Gail, and I said, "I'll see you tomorrow." And she said, "No, take the day off. I'll see you on Wednesday." And I thought, this is real. Democracy was loud, messy, could be fun, and I got a day off. And we still had work to do, and we still have work to do. This Saturday, there will be protests all across the country, including in Chicago. You know what they're about. I wish Gail was here, because she'd know how to nail the rats to the door and have a good time doing it. Thanks.
Keep it going for Dan!